In the heart of Igbo land, where the lush forests whispered ancient secrets, stood the great kingdom of Nri. For centuries, the Eze Nri, the divine king, had ruled with wisdom and restraint. But power, like a sweet poison, can corrupt even the noblest of hearts. Eze Chukwuemeka ascended to the throne young and ambitious. Unlike his predecessors, he saw the kingdom not as a sacred trust, but as his personal playground. His appetite for wealth and women knew no bounds. As the years passed, Eze Chukwuemeka's greed grew. He took more wives than any Eze before him, amassing a harem of 200 women. His children numbered 1,500, a small army in their own right. The palace, once a place of quiet dignity, now echoed with the constant cries of infants and the squabbles of jealous wives. But the Eze's hunger was far from satisfied. He demanded more tribute from his subjects, more land, more power. The people of Nri, once proud of their divine king, began to whisper in the shadows. They called him Eze Anya Ukwu, the king with the big eye, always looking for more. One day, a wizened old woman appeared at the palace gates. Her white hair stood in stark contrast to her dark skin, wrinkled like the bark of an ancient Iroko tree. The guards, amused by her audacity, let her pass. She hobbled into the throne room where Eze Chukwuemeka sat surrounded by his favorites. "Great Eze," she croaked, her voice like dry leaves in the wind. "I bring you a warning from the ancestors." The Eze laughed, a booming sound that echoed off the walls. "And what do the dead have to say to the living?" The old woman's eyes flashed. "They say your greed will be your undoing, Eze Anya Ukwu. Turn back now, or face a curse that will destroy not just you, but all you hold dear." Eze Chukwuemeka's face darkened with rage. "How dare you threaten me in my own palace? Guards, throw this hag into the evil forest." As the guards dragged her away, the old woman's voice rang out, "Remember, Eze Anya Ukwu, the curse begins tonight." That night, as the moon hung full and heavy in the sky, a strange stillness fell over the palace. The usual cacophony of crying babies and chattering wives fell silent. Eze Chukwuemeka tossed and turned in his bed, unable to shake a feeling of impending doom. Suddenly, a child's scream pierced the night, then another and another. The Eze bolted upright, his heart pounding. He rushed out of his chambers only to find the palace in chaos. Children ran through the corridors, their eyes wide with terror. Wives wailed, clutching at empty cribs. The Eze's blood ran cold as he realized the truth. Half of his children had vanished into thin air. As dawn broke, the full extent of the curse became clear. 750 children, from newborns to teenagers, had disappeared without a trace. The remaining children huddled in fear, refusing to sleep lest they too vanish in the night. Eze Chukwuemeka, his face ashen, called for his dibia, the royal priest. "What sorcery is this?" he demanded. "Find my children." The dibia, a man whose knowledge of the spirit world was unparalleled, performed ritual after ritual. But the spirits remained silent. "Great Eze," he finally admitted. "This is beyond my power. The curse is too strong." Desperation gripped the Eze. He sent out search parties, promised rewards, even considered raiding neighboring kingdoms. But as the days turned to weeks, hope dwindled. The wives, once rivals, now united in grief. They blamed the Eze for their loss, their wails of sorrow turning to cries of anger. The people of Nri, hearing of the curse, whispered that it was divine punishment for the Eze's greed. As the kingdom teetered on the brink of chaos, Eze Chukwuemeka made a fateful decision. He would journey into the evil forest, the realm of dark spirits, to beg for the return of his children. The evil forest loomed at the edge of the kingdom, a place where the trees grew too close together and the shadows seemed alive. No sane person entered willingly, for it was said that those who went in never came out. Ezi Chukwuemeka stood at the forest's edge, stripped of his royal robes. He wore only a simple loincloth, his body smeared with white chalk. In his hand, he clutched a staff topped with a carved wooden head, a symbol of his authority as Eze Nri. Taking a deep breath, he stepped into the darkness. The forest seemed to close in around him. Vines snaked across his path, thorns tore at his skin. Strange cries echoed in the distance, and eyes gleamed in the darkness. But the Eze pressed on, driven by desperation and the faint hope of redemption. For 3 days and 3 nights, Ezi Chukwuemeka wandered the evil forest. His feet bled, his stomach cramped with hunger, but still he searched. On the 4th day, as his strength began to fail, he stumbled into a clearing. In the center stood a massive Iroko tree, its trunk wider than 10 men could encircle. Seated at its base was the old woman who had cursed him, her white hair glowing in the dim light. "So, Eze Anya Ukwu," she said, her voice now strong and clear, "you have come at last." Ezi Chukwuemeka fell to his knees. "Please," he begged, "return my children. I'll do anything." The old woman's eyes narrowed. "Anything? Would you give up your throne, your wealth, your remaining wives and children?" The Eze hesitated, his greed warring with his love for his lost children. But in that moment of indecision, the old woman vanished, and the forest around him began to shift and change. The trees twisted, their branches reaching out like grasping hands. The ground beneath his feet turned to quicksand, slowly pulling him down. Ezi Chukwuemeka screamed, thrashing wildly, but it was no use. The forest, it seemed, had decided his fate. As he sank deeper, images flashed before his eyes. He saw his lost children, trapped in a shadowy realm, crying out for him. He saw his wives and his people, turning their backs on him in disgust. And he saw himself, sitting alone on a throne of bones, surrounded by the wealth he had hoarded. With his last breath, Ezi Chukwuemeka cried out, "I'm sorry. I renounce it all. Just save my children." Suddenly, the forest fell still. The quicksand solidified, stopping just as it reached the Eze's neck. The old woman reappeared, her face solemn. "Your words come late, Eze Anya Ukwu," she said. "But they are not in vain. Your children will be returned, but at a price." With a wave of her hand, the forest melted away. Ezi Chukwuemeka found himself back in his throne room, surrounded by his wives and advisors. But something was different. His body felt strange, unfamiliar. As he looked down at his hands, he realized with horror that they were gnarled and wrinkled. His once muscular frame had shrunk, his skin sagging with age. He had become an old man overnight. The old woman's voice echoed in his mind. "This is the price of your greed, Ezi Chukwuemeka. You will live to see your children grow, but you will never again know the pleasures of youth. Use your remaining years wisely." In that moment, a great commotion arose outside the palace. The lost children had reappeared, materializing in the streets of Nri as suddenly as they had vanished. Cries of joy and disbelief filled the air as families were reunited. But the joy was short-lived. As the children were brought before the Eze, they recoiled in fear. They spoke of a dark realm where they had been trapped, forced to labor for shadowy spirits. In their eyes, Ezi Chukwuemeka saw not love or relief, but resentment and trauma. The curse had been lifted, but its effects lingered. The kingdom of Nri, once prosperous and unified, now seethed with tension. The Eze's wives, though grateful for the return of their children, could not forget the pain of loss. The people, who had suffered under the Eze's greed, now openly questioned his right to rule. Chukwuemeka, his body old but his mind sharp with regret, faced a kingdom on the brink of collapse. He knew that his remaining years would be spent not in luxury, but in a desperate attempt to rebuild what his greed had destroyed. As news of the curse and its aftermath spread, neighboring kingdoms began to eye Nuri's weakened state with interest. Whispers of invasion and conquest reached the Eze's ears, adding to his burden. In his private moments, Eze Chukwuemeka would stand before a mirror, staring at his aged reflection. He remembered the old woman's words, "Use your remaining years wisely." But how could he undo a lifetime of greed and selfishness? The answer came from an unexpected source. Adana, his youngest wife, barely more than a girl herself, approached him one day. Unlike the others, she looked at him not with disgust or pity, but with compassion. "Great Eze," she said softly, "our people suffer. The children who returned are not the same. They need healing, as does our kingdom." Her words sparked something in the Eze's tired heart. For the first time in years, he looked beyond his own desires and saw the needs of his people. With Adana's help, Eze Chukwuemeka began to change. He opened the palace storehouses, distributing food and wealth to those in need. He listened to the grievances of his subjects, working to right old wrongs. And most importantly, he focused on healing the trauma of the lost children. The Eze brought in dibias and healers from across Igbo land, seeking ways to soothe the children's troubled minds. He established new rituals of cleansing and protection, drawing on the deepest wisdom of their ancestors. Slowly, painfully, the kingdom began to heal. The children, though forever changed by their ordeal, started to smile again. The wives, seeing the Eze's genuine remorse and effort, softened towards him. The people, wary at first, began to hope that perhaps their divine king had truly changed. But the greatest challenge was yet to come. As Eze Chukwuemeka worked to rebuild his kingdom, dark forces gathered at the borders. The neighboring kingdom of Arachukwu, long jealous of Nuri's power, saw an opportunity to strike. Word reached the Eze that an army was marching towards Nri, led by the fearsome king of Arachukwu. In his prime, Eze Chukwuemeka would have relished the chance for battle and conquest. Now, old and weary, he knew that war would destroy everything he had worked to rebuild. In a desperate move, the Eze did something no ruler of Nri had ever done before. He called for a gathering of all the kings and chiefs of Igbo land, proposing an alliance to stand against Arachukwu. The gathering was tense, filled with old rivalries and suspicions. Many of the leaders had suffered under Eze Chukwuemeka's former greed and were reluctant to trust him. But as the Eze spoke, his voice cracking with age and emotion, something changed in the room. He confessed his past sins, laying bare the story of the curse and its terrible consequences. He spoke of the lessons he had learned, the price he had paid, and his dream of a united Igbo land where all could prosper. To everyone's shock, Eze Chukwuemeka removed his crown and placed it in the center of the gathering. "I am old," he said, "and my time is nearly done, but our people will live on. Let us put aside our differences and stand together, not for my sake, but for the future of our children." His words and the humility behind them struck a chord. One by one, the kings and chiefs added their own symbols of authority to the pile. By the end of the day, a historic alliance had been forged. When the army of Arachukwu arrived at the borders of Nri, they found not a weakened kingdom, but a united force of all Igbo land standing against them. The king of Arachukwu, seeing the futility of battle, agreed to negotiate. In the peace talks that followed, Eze Chukwuemeka demonstrated a wisdom that amazed everyone present. Instead of seeking punishment or tribute, he proposed a series of trade agreements and cultural exchanges that would benefit all the kingdoms. As the delegates left, there was a sense that something momentous had occurred. The curse that had seemed like the end of Ninri had instead become the catalyst for a new era of unity and prosperity in Igboland. Eze Chukwuemeka lived for several more years, long enough to see the fruits of his labor. The kingdom flourished, the alliance held, and the children who had once been lost grew into strong, resilient adults. On his deathbed, surrounded by his wives and countless children and grandchildren, the Eze finally felt at peace. Adana, now a respected elder herself, held his hand as he spoke his last words. "I was cursed by my greed," he whispered, "but blessed by the chance to make amends. Tell our people to remember not the man I was, but the lesson I learned. True wealth lies not in possessions or power, but in the hearts of those we love and serve." As word of Eze Chukwuemeka's death spread, something remarkable happened. People from all over Igboland, from the highest chiefs to the lowliest farmers, came to pay their respects. They spoke not of his past greed, but of his transformation and the good he had done in his final years. The funeral rites lasted for 7 days and 7 nights, as was fitting for a ruler of Nuri. But unlike the lavish, self-aggrandizing ceremonies of the past, this one was marked by simplicity and true mourning. As the Eze's body was laid to rest, the old woman who had cursed him appeared one last time. Only Adana saw her, standing at the edge of the burial ground. The old woman nodded once, a look of satisfaction on her face, then vanished into the shadows of the forest. The story of Eze Chukwuemeka, the greedy king who learned the true meaning of wealth, became legend throughout Igboland. Parents told it to their children as a warning against greed and a lesson in redemption. Dibia used it in their teachings about the power of curses and the importance of heeding the wisdom of the ancestors. But perhaps the most important legacy was the change it wrought in the rulership of Nuri. Never again would an Eze be allowed to accumulate such wealth or take so many wives. The people established new checks on royal power, ensuring that future rulers would serve the kingdom rather than exploit it. The alliance forged in the face of invasion continued to grow and evolve. Over time, it developed into a confederacy of Igbo states, united in trade and culture while maintaining their individual identities. The period became known as the Great Peace, a golden age of prosperity and innovation. As for the children who had been lost to the curse, their story did not end with their return. Many of them grew up to become powerful Dibias and healers, their time in the spirit realm having given them unique insights into the unseen world. Others became advisors and peacemakers, their traumatic experiences driving them to prevent conflict and promote understanding. One of these children, a girl named Olana, eventually rose to become the first female Eze of Nuri. Her reign marked a new chapter in the kingdom's history, characterized by compassion, wisdom, and a deep respect for the balance between the human and spirit worlds. And so, the curse that had been meant to destroy Nuri became the foundation of its greatest transformation. The kingdom that had once been known for its greedy, all-powerful Eze became a beacon of just rule and shared prosperity. In the end, the true horror of the story lay not in the curse itself, but in the realization of how close greed and self-interest had brought a great civilization to destruction. It served as a perpetual reminder to the people of Igboland that true power comes not from accumulation, but from wisdom, compassion, and service to others. As generations passed, the legend of Eze Chukwuemeka and the curse took on new dimensions. Storytellers in village squares captivated audiences with tales of the children's ordeals in the spirit realm. They spoke of dark forests where trees whispered forgotten names, of shadowy beings that fed on greed and fear, and of the strength found in unity and sacrifice. But as with all legends, the truth began to blur with fiction. Some versions of the story claim that Izi had not truly reformed, but had tricked the old woman and the spirits. These darker tellings warned of a time when the curse would return, stronger than ever. It was during the reign of Eze Olana, nearly a century after Eze death, that these whispers of doom seemed to gain substance. The harvest that year had been particularly bountiful, and the kingdom was celebrating with a grand festival. As night fell and the bonfires blazed, casting long shadows across the village squares, something strange began to happen. Children started to disappear. At first, it was just one or two, easy enough to explain away as youngsters wandering off in the excitement of the festivities. But as the night wore on, more and more children vanished. Parents called out desperately, searching every corner of the kingdom. By dawn, 50 children were missing. Panic gripped Enri. The elders whispered that the curse had returned, that Ezichukwuemeka's sins were being visited upon a new generation. Some blamed Eze Olana, arguing that the spirits were angry at a woman sitting on the sacred throne. Eze Olana, however, remained calm. She called for silence in the royal court and spoke with a voice that carried the weight of her unique heritage. "I am the child of the curse," she reminded them. "I walked in the spirit realm and returned. We will not be ruled by fear. We will find our children." She ordered the kingdom sealed, no one in or out. Then she did something unprecedented. She called for volunteers among the adults to offer themselves in exchange for the children. "The spirits took our children out of vengeance for an Eze's greed," she declared. "Let us show them the sacrifice we are willing to make for the innocent." The response was overwhelming. Parents, siblings, and even those with no family of their own stepped forward. As the sun set on the second day, 100 adults stood ready to enter the evil forest, willing to take the place of the missing children. Eze Olana led them to the forest's edge. Just as they were about to step into the darkness, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. It was the old woman, seemingly untouched by time. "You have learned well," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite its softness. "But this is not the return of the old curse. This is a new test." She waved her hand and the air shimmered. The volunteers gasped as they saw their children, not trapped in some spirit realm, but hidden in a valley just beyond the forest. They were scared and confused, but unharmed. "Your children were taken not by spirits, but by men," the old woman explained. "Slavers from across the great water, who heard tales of Nri's wealth and thought to profit from its greatest treasure, its youth." Eze Olana's eyes flashed with anger, but her voice remained steady. "What would you have us do, wise one?" The old woman smiled, revealing teeth as white as her hair. "You have already done it. You showed that you value your children above all else, that you would sacrifice yourselves for them. This is a lesson the slavers cannot understand, and it will be their undoing." With another wave of her hand, the old woman vanished. In her place stood the leaders of the slaver band, bound and bewildered, as if they had been plucked from their hiding spot and deposited before the kingdom's forces. What followed was not a battle, but a reckoning. The slavers, faced with the united will of Nri and the seemingly magical power of their ruler, quickly surrendered. The children were reunited with their families amidst tears of joy and relief. But Eze Olana knew that this was only the beginning. The threat of slavery, this new and terrible danger from across the sea, would not end with one foiled attempt. She called together not just the leaders of the Igbo alliance, but sent envoys to kingdoms beyond, spreading word of the new threat. In the months and years that followed, a new network of cooperation spread across the coast of West Africa. Watchtowers were built, warning systems established. More importantly, knowledge was shared of the strangers' languages, their weapons, their weaknesses. The legend of Nri grew. Tales spread of a kingdom protected by powerful spirits, where children could disappear and reappear at will, and where the earth itself would swallow up those who came with evil intentions. Some slavers, hearing these stories, avoided the area entirely. Those who were foolish enough to make attempts found themselves facing not just the forewarned and prepared kingdoms, but their own superstitious fears. More than one slaving ship fled the coast, its crew gibbering about forests that moved and children who turned into vengeful spirits. As for the children of Nri, who had endured those frightening days of captivity, they grew up with a fierce determination to protect their homeland. Many became warriors and scouts, their traumatic experience honed into a weapon to defend the innocent. Others dedicated themselves to diplomacy and trade, working to build alliances that would make their people stronger. One of these children, a boy named Ikenna, would go on to become a great traveler. He journeyed far beyond the boundaries of Igboland, even crossing the Great Water to see for himself the lands where the slavers came from. He returned with knowledge that would help fortify Africa against the coming storm of colonialism, though that is a story for another time. Eze Olana ruled for many years, overseeing an era of growth and innovation. The alliance she strengthened would face many challenges in the centuries to come, but its foundation remained solid. The memory of the curse and the lessons learned from it became a source of strength and wisdom for generations. In time, the story of Eze Chukwuemeka, the greedy king whose curse had ultimately led to salvation, faded into myth. But its essence, the dangers of unchecked greed, the strength found in unity, and the power of sacrifice, remained embedded in the culture of Nri and beyond. And on quiet nights, when the moon hangs heavy in the sky and the forests whisper with ancient secrets, they say you can still hear the laughter of children who were once lost but now are found. A joyful reminder of a people's resilience in the face of unimaginable horrors. As for the old woman, some say she was a spirit, a manifestation of the land itself. Others believe she was the first Eze Nri, returned to guide her people in their time of need. But most agree on one thing. She is still out there, watching and waiting, ready to test the hearts of those who would lead and to remind them of the true source of a kingdom's strength. And so, the story of the curse becomes a blessing, a tale not of horror, but of hope. It stands as a testament to the power of change, the strength of unity, and the enduring spirit of a people who face darkness and emerge stronger in the light. In Nri and in Igboland, they do not fear the night or the shadows in the forest, for they know that true horror lies not in curses or spirits, but in the greed and cruelty of human hearts. And they know, too, that they have the power to overcome it together. The end.